I'm 78 years old, and most mornings I wake before the sun, not because I'm disciplined or eager for the day, but because sleep no longer holds me the way it once did. I lie there for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house, and for a few seconds I forget that I'm alone. Then I turn my head toward the left side of the bed and remember that it's been empty for 11 years. I sleep on the right side now. The left still feels like it belongs to her. People assume that by the time you reach my age, loneliness becomes something ordinary, like stiff joints or fading eyesight. They think you adapt. You don't. You simply learn how to carry it without letting it spill in front of others. When my wife died, I was 67. That didn't sound old to me then. It sounded like the beginning of a quieter chapter, maybe even a gentler one. I truly believed I would find love again. I believed there was still time to build something new, even if it was smaller, even if it was different. That's the part I'm almost embarrassed to admit. At funerals, people said kind things. They told me we'd had a long marriage, a good run. I nodded, grateful, but the phrase stayed with me. A good run. As if love were something you complete and then set down like a finished task. I didn't feel finished. I felt abruptly paused. The house changed after she was gone. Not physically, not at first. The furniture stayed where it was. Her dishes remained in the cabinet. Her coat hung in the hallway closet for months because I couldn't bring myself to move it. But the sound changed. Every clock seemed louder. The refrigerator hummed like it was trying to fill the silence. I would walk into a room and forget why I'd entered. Not because my memory had failed me, but because there was no one there to anchor the moment. For the first year, I stayed busy. I cleaned out the garage. I reorganized drawers that didn't need organizing. I painted the fence, even though it wasn't peeling. Friends said staying active would help. It did, in a way. It kept my hands occupied. It didn't quiet my mind. About a year after she passed, my daughter asked me gently whether I had considered meeting someone. I could see she was worried about me shrinking into myself. I told her I wasn't opposed to it. I still drove at night. I could still hold a conversation. I told myself companionship at this age would be simple. 2 people sharing dinners, watching television, maybe taking short trips. It sounded practical, reasonable. I didn't yet understand that dating after 60 isn't simple. It's layered with history and caution and ghosts that sit quietly at the table. When I was 24 and met my wife, we were both still becoming who we were. We didn't have much money. Our first couch came from her aunt's basement, springs poking through the cushions. We laughed about it because discomfort felt temporary back then. Everything felt temporary except us. We grew into adulthood side by side. Our habits formed together. Our flaws revealed themselves gradually, and we adjusted without keeping score. In your 20s and 30s, you're not comparing someone to decades of shared memories. You're not measuring them against the way they held your hand in a hospital waiting room or the sound of their footsteps in the hallway at night. You're building from scratch, and that makes things lighter. At 78, you're not building. You're preserving what remains. The first time I went on a date after my wife died, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my collar and felt like I was pretending to be a younger version of myself. The woman I met was kind, widowed too. We talked about safe topics: grandchildren, weather, the price of groceries. We didn't speak about the way the house feels at night when you switch off the last lamp. There was politeness between us, but also caution. When you're older, you don't fall into love. You edge toward it carefully, aware of how thin the ice might be. We saw each other a few times: lunches, a matinee movie where we both nearly fell asleep. She spoke about her late husband often. I spoke about my wife. Not intentionally, not to compare, but because they were still part of our sentences. Eventually the calls became less frequent. There was no argument, no dramatic ending. It simply dissolved. That became a pattern over the years. Relationships at this age don't usually explode. They fade quietly. I tried online dating for a while. My grandson helped me set up a profile. I remember feeling foolish asking him how to upload a photograph, like I'd missed some essential class everyone else had taken. I stared at the blank space where a description was supposed to go and wondered how to summarize a life in a few polite sentences. Retired, widower, enjoys gardening. It felt thin, like I was advertising a version of myself, stripped of depth. There's something humbling about realizing you're no longer the future in anyone's story. You're an addition, perhaps, but not the foundation. I met several women over those years, some divorced, some widowed, some who had chosen to remain single most of their lives. Each one carried something heavy: health concerns, estranged children, financial scars from old marriages, distrust that hadn't entirely faded. And I carried my own history too. What no one says openly is that dating after 60 requires emotional stamina most of us are quietly losing. It isn't just about physical energy, though that matters. My knees ache if I sit too long. My hearing sometimes forces me to ask someone to repeat themselves, which can be embarrassing on a first date. But it's the emotional effort that weighs on you. Opening up at 78 feels riskier, not because you're afraid of heartbreak in the dramatic sense, but because you don't want to spend your remaining years rebuilding from scratch. In your 30s, if a relationship fails, you grieve and begin again. There's time to recover. At my age, starting over feels like moving houses in the middle of a storm, knowing you may not have the strength for another relocation. There was one woman, Carol, whom I dated for nearly a year. She had a gentle laugh and a habit of touching my arm when she spoke. We took short trips to nearby towns, walked slowly through antique shops, shared slices of pie in quiet diners. It was comfortable, I won't deny that. But comfort is not the same as shared history. I caught myself comparing her to my wife in small, unfair ways. The way she seasoned her food, the way she folded laundry. I didn't want to do that. It wasn't fair to her. She deserved to be seen on her own terms. But after 45 years with one woman, your mind doesn't erase patterns easily. Carol once suggested I consider selling my house and moving closer to her children. I hesitated, not because I didn't care for her, but because my house holds the story of my life. The scratch on the hallway wall from when my son rode his bicycle indoors. The garden my wife planted the year before she got sick. The chair by the window where she used to sit and read. Leaving that felt like losing her all over again. We ended things gently, no anger, just an understanding that neither of us wanted to uproot what stability we had left. Health becomes a silent participant in every relationship at this age. Every woman I met had a list of medications, stories about surgeries, doctor appointments scheduled months in advance. You don't date someone at 78 without knowing that one of you will likely sit beside the other in a hospital room sooner rather than later. That awareness changes the tone of everything. Last winter I slipped on ice outside the grocery store. It wasn't severe, but as I lay there for a moment staring at the grey sky, I felt fragile in a way I hadn't before. A young man helped me to my feet and asked if he should call someone. I said no, but that night, alone with an ice pack on my hip, I thought about how different it would have felt if someone had been waiting for me at home. Vulnerability at this age isn't romantic, it's practical. It's about who drives you to appointments, who notices when you don't answer the phone, who holds your hand when test results come back uncertain. There's also family to consider. Adult children are polite but protective. They worry about finances, about inheritance, about whether a new person is genuine. I can't blame them. I'd feel the same if roles were reversed. But it adds weight. You're not simply blending two hearts. You're blending entire histories, entire family systems. Over time, I began to notice that many of the women I met weren't necessarily searching for passionate love. They were searching for safety, for companionship without too much complication. Someone to share a meal with, perhaps a holiday, but not necessarily a fully merged life. I had to ask myself what I was truly looking for. Was it love, or was it relief from the silence that settles in after dinner, when the dishes are done and the evening stretches long? That question took me years to answer honestly. I spent much of my younger life believing there would always be more time to travel, more time to sit on the porch, more time to apologize for harsh words spoken in passing. When my wife would ask me to sit with her, sometimes I'd say, "In a minute." There were bills to review, tools to put away, tasks that felt urgent. I assumed we had decades. The hard truth about dating after 60 is that it forces you to confront what you lost because you assumed time was generous. You cannot recreate 50 years of shared mornings. You cannot compress decades of intimacy into a handful of seasons. And at 78, you don't have another lifetime to build that depth again. The turning point for me wasn't dramatic. A woman I'd been seeing casually called to tell me she'd been diagnosed with a progressive illness. She didn't want to burden anyone, she said. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table watching the afternoon light crawl across the floor. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I realized that love at this age often means caregiving, and caregiving means loss eventually. I had already walked that road once. The hospital rooms, the slow decline, the quiet prayers whispered at night. I'm not certain I have the strength to do it again, and I'm not certain I want someone to have to do it for me. That's the part few people say aloud. Dating after 60 isn't only about companionship, it's about who will sit beside whose hospital bed. Now, when I look back on my marriage, I feel both gratitude and regret. We weren't perfect. I worked long hours. I believed providing financially was the same as being present. If I could return to those years, I would sit longer at the dinner table. I would listen more closely to stories I once brushed aside. You don't understand how sacred ordinary evenings are until they're gone. When younger men tell me they're determined to find someone new at my age, I don't discourage them, but I don't romanticize it either. The hard truth is that if you're looking for a girlfriend after 60, to erase loneliness completely, you may still find yourself lonely. Another person can offer warmth and conversation, even affection, but they cannot replace the weight of shared history built over decades. These days, I've stopped actively searching, not because I've closed my heart, but because I've learned that peace matters more than possibility. I wake up, make my coffee, and sit by the window watching the same tree change with the seasons. I plant tomatoes in the spring. I tend to them slowly without rushing. In the evenings I sit on the right side of the couch. The left remains empty. Some nights the loneliness is sharp. Other nights it feels like an old coat I've grown used to wearing. I'm not angry at life. I'm not bitter about love. I'm simply aware that some chapters close without replacement. If you're younger and listening to me, don't assume there will always be more time. Sit longer with the people you love. Put aside the small tasks that can wait. If you're over 60 and considering dating again, be honest with yourself. Ask whether you're ready to accept someone fully, with their limitations and history, and whether you can offer the same without resentment. Love at 24 is about building. Love at 78 is about tending gently to what little time remains. As for me, tomorrow morning I'll wake before the sun again, sit on the edge of my bed, and make peace once more with the quiet. At my age, that quiet isn't the enemy, it's simply what's left.